Today from r/LetsNotMeet. My nighttime park stalker. At the time this happened, I was a 13-year-old female. This happened 2 years ago and I was fairly naive. I was a major introvert, only friends with a few people in my class. I wanted to be social, but I preferred to be alone and read or write. Classic nerd things. In early November, I got a text on my phone that was from a few classmates whose phone numbers I had, and around one or two I couldn't recognize. It was a group chat, asking if we wanted to hang out at night near a park at our school. My parents, being strict and paranoid, would never let me go. Luckily, or what I thought was luck, they were headed out for an overnight trip and would be back around 4 o'clock in the morning. Everything fell into place. Once my parents left around 8ish, I ran out the door and made my way to the park. The one thing I made sure to do was to lock the door. My parents were paranoid after all, and it was their biggest thing that they engraved into me. Once I arrived at the park, I noticed a creepy figure near the edge of the woods. No one else seemed to notice it, and I already had enough reputation as a weirdo who was true crime obsessed. I didn't mention it. The night drew on and on. I was having the time of my life, ignoring the gut feeling I had telling me to run. Every so often I would look over my shoulder and the man would be standing there. Around 9:45, 4 out of 10 people there had to leave due to their curfew. It was getting cold and nearly pitch black, with a few streetlights every so often. So the rest of us decided to go as well, since it felt more eerie and quiet. The place we were hanging out was a field that was fenced in with a few exits and entrances. A large wide field with a small park in the back and our giant middle school behind us. The front of the field faced the empty road, and the right and left sides were surrounded by forest. All of the people left were getting picked up by cars, meaning they went the opposite way of the road, since that's where the parking lot was. The man stood right by the forest road exit that I needed to take home. I walked away from my group and tried to steady my heavy breathing. I didn't want to be paranoid, but all the true crime I listened to was catching up to me. This man was probably early 40s, late 30s, dark hair with a beard. He was probably 5'9", but at the time it seemed like 6 foot. He stood about 10 feet from the exit I had to take, so when I got close enough to it, I ran for about 30 feet through the exit and through the woods. Once I felt safe enough, I started just to quickly walk through the woods, or at least get to the road. I heard a snap and a crunch from behind me. I stopped walking for a second and quickly checked over my shoulder. Around 15 feet behind me stood the very same man. He was walking slowly behind me, almost as if he was trying not to be suspicious, but it only made my fear worse. I turned around and walked so quickly, I was basically jogging. I lived about 10 minutes away from the park we had hung out at, and I wasn't athletic enough to run home. After around 7 minutes of walking fast, I was in my neighborhood. I knew that I could run to my house if I had to, so I checked to see if he was trailing behind me. To my horror, he was only 5 feet away. I ran faster than I've ever ran. I could hear his footsteps behind me thumping across the concrete as he ran too. I dove down an alleyway I knew well and I tried to lose him in the park, making my way home longer. I could hear his heavy breath followed by his footsteps as he tried to keep up. I cut through the houses, backyards, and front yards. I finally made it to my house and flew up the stairs. I looked behind me and had just arrived at the bottom of my stairs. I unlocked the door and burst through it, shoving it closed behind me, and I heard him hit the door with his whole body. I ran around the house and locked all the windows, turned off the lights, and hid in my bedroom with a kitchen knife just in case he got in. He didn't, luckily. If it was a better world, that's where my story would end, but it doesn't. After a few months, I haven't really told anyone what happened since I didn't want to get in trouble with my parents for sneaking out or anything. I didn't go out with anyone or any group anymore, and my loner status returned. I began to write horror stories as a coping mechanism, and I never went out past 7 p.m. It was around February when a classmate of mine was sharing a story of some random man following her home on the bus. She described him almost the exact same as the man who had chased me home. Another girl mentioned that he sounded like the guy who stood outside the school and tried to follow her home. I didn't join in, but everyone agreed that he was just a weird guy. He was kind of forgotten, and eventually I moved on too. Around May, I was getting ready to walk to school when my mom pulled up beside me and showed me a picture of a man. The guy who stalked me, actually. He was taken into custody 2 weeks ago for sexually assaulting a child and had escaped last night. She told me to keep an eye out for him and to call the cops if I saw him. I was shaking the whole time I walked to school. It haunts me to know that if he had caught me, I most likely would have been in her position or even dead. So creepy nighttime stalker who liked to hunt down young girls. Let's not meet again.